So this is our first batch of cookies. Here I'm just putting in the flour for all the recipes. We just used all-purpose flour, so this is the same in every recipe. It was 1.5 cups of flour. Then we took our salt and we used 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and this was the same in every recipe as well. So here we're just putting in the salt. Then we've got our baking soda, and in the first recipe we only use 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, which is going to not flatten out our cookies so much and make them a little bit more puffed. Then we're just sifting all of this together. Now we are adding our butter. Our butter was about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're using 10 tablespoons of just the regular unsalted butter. And because the butter has water in it, the cookies will spread out a little bit thinner. Now we're taking our sugar. We just used 1 cup of white sugar, so the cookies will be a little bit more white and won't become as brown as they otherwise would be. Now we're just creaming those together to get the sugar molecules and the fat molecules to mix. So we beat that for about 2 minutes until it was really light and fluffy, and there was some air incorporated into the mixture. So here's our finished product of the butter and sugar. Now we're just adding 1 egg, and the whites will help to dry out the cookie mixture a little bit. The yolk adds tenderness. This will contribute to the liquid of the mixture, and both will help the batter to set and minimize their spread in the oven. Now we're adding a tablespoon of vanilla for taste. Yeah, love vanilla. Now we're adding our dry ingredients. We're just placing part of the ingredients in, beating that until it's completely incorporated, and then we're just adding more. Now we're doing the final mixing, adding our chocolate chips, adding 1 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips, and then our finished mixture comes out to be about 71 degrees Fahrenheit after we have all this added together. We have our second batch of cookies, and in this batch we're adding 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda instead of half, and this is going to cause the cookies to spread a little bit more. So now we're taking our butter again. We're just doing 10 tablespoons of butter, and again this is going to help thin them out as well because of the water content. And our butter is about 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Now we're adding the sugar. We did 1/2 cup of our regular white sugar, and now we're doing 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar. This is going to cause the cookies to have a little bit more of that brown flavor, not brown flavor, color, and it's going to make them a little bit extra crispy. I love cookies with brown sugar. I think they're just better. So now I'm just letting that mix together. It's taking a little bit longer than the first one because the butter was in clumps. Here's a finished product of that. Now we're just adding a little light corn syrup, and this is going to cause our mixture to spread a little bit more because it's liquid and also be used for a lot of browning in the cookie. So now we're just letting that mix. Now we're using milk instead of an egg, so the cookie will spread a little bit more, and also that milk will have a little bit of water in it and cause the cookie to puff a bit. Now we're just mixing that up. Again, we're just adding a tablespoon of vanilla to get that flavor and mixing that up once again. Now we're just taking our dry ingredients and putting them into our wet again at different intervals, just as we did before, just doing the same thing. The only thing that's changed in this recipe is the sugar, the milk instead of the egg, and the baking soda. Once again, we're just adding a cup of our semi-sweet chocolate chips, letting that mix for 5 seconds, and then doing the rest with a spatula to scrape it down, get all the dough in there, with our final dough temperature being about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Now here we are just starting the third batch, which is our in-between cookies. So we're just adding our flour again, same as all the other recipes. Then we're just going to add our salt. Once again, just the same as all the other recipes. This recipe that's going to change is we are using baking powder instead of baking soda. And this is going to allow the cookies to bake a little bit faster and spread a little bit less. And this also reacts quickly and needs a little bit of a higher temp to resolve because of its acid-base reaction that comes with water. So now we're just sifting this together just like before. Now in this mixture we have both Crisco and butter. Our Crisco is about 72 degrees Fahrenheit and our butter is about 67. Now we just took 3/4 of a cup of our brown sugar instead of any white sugar. We're not using white sugar in this recipe. And we're just creaming that together. Now we are adding 2 tablespoons of our corn syrup, which again is just going to help for browning and a little bit more spread in our cookies, but not a lot of spread. So we're just mixing that up once again. So here's our finished product of the sugars and the butter mixed together and the Crisco. Now we're just adding an egg, again for the spread, but also to for our liquid, and to keep the cookie from spreading out so much, to dry and for some tenderness. So the egg is just really fantastic. And just some vanilla for flavor again. Without vanilla, it would taste gross. Now we're just doing our dry ingredients once again, just a little at a time, mixing them in until the dough is formed. Just adding that all together. And now for my favorite part, we are about to put our chocolate chips in. We're taking our Ghirardelli 60% dark chocolate chips, and these were in the freezer. And at the end when I took the temperature, the dough was about 58 degrees Fahrenheit, so it had shifted about 10 degrees. And I think the reason for this is the chocolate chips were frozen, which made everything colder. Okay, for our ingredients today, for the flour, for every cookie we use the gold medal all-purpose flour. It's enriched, bleached, and there's that. For our salt today, we used our good old Morton salt. For our baking soda today, we used Arm & Hammer pure baking soda. For our baking powder, we just used our Baking Corner brand baking powder. For our Crisco, which is our butter flavored shortening, we used just regular Crisco shortening sticks, butter flavor. For our regular butter, we just used the Kroger unsalted butter. For our sugars, for our brown sugar, we used Baker's Corner light brown sugar. For regular sugar, we used Pist's brand. For our corn syrup, we use the Caro light corn syrup. For our milk, we used the Dillon's brand low-fat milk. Eggs, we just used eggs. In some of our in the first 2 batches, we used Nestle semi-sweet chocolate chips, and then in our last one, we used the wonderful and fantastic Ghirardelli chocolate premium baking chips that are 60% cacao, because everyone in my family, including myself, loves dark chocolate, and semi-sweet almost doesn't even taste good anymore. So that's all of our ingredients that we use today. After letting our dough sit for an hour in the fridge, I'm just scooping them out on the cookies out onto a cookie sheet. Our dough was about 63 degrees Fahrenheit, so hadn't dropped a lot, stayed pretty similar. So yeah, now I'm just scooping them out onto a cookie sheet. Now I just placed them in the oven, which was at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Set the timer for 10 minutes at first, but ended up leaving them in for about 13 minutes total, but always better to bake them a little bit shorter at first and add more time. Here's the finished product of the cookies. They look really good. They're not super brown, but they don't have any brown sugar or corn syrup in them, so I think that contributed a lot to it. So now just starting the second pan. The final temp of the cookies when they just came out of the oven was about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I'm just doing the second batch. Once again, I did this for every batch. Just took the cookies out on the cookie sheet. All of them are about the same temperature, maybe a 1 or 2 degree difference in the dough. Baked them each for 13 to 12 minutes, and that's basically all I did for every single batch. Here's the second batch, the thin layer right out of the oven, and as you can see, they're very thin, a lot more brown, and yeah, they were really delicious. So here's a third batch, again just scooping them out, putting them in a 375 degree oven for 12 to 13 minutes. And here's the finished product of those cookies, again a little bit more puffed but still brown. Here's a little bit more B-roll of me scooping cookies while I tell you the rest. So, yeah, definitely the ones with no brown sugar were the lightest ones, and they were actually my family's least favorite, so we really love brown sugar. Everyone's favorite were the ultra thin ones, so the ones that had more baking soda. They had brown sugar, white sugar, and corn syrup. They also had milk instead of an egg, which is interesting, so I guess they're not vegan, but they're vegetarian cookies, so that's interesting. But yeah, that was definitely my family's favorite, and this is a really fun experiment, and I ate way too much cookie dough. Thank you all so much for watching.